we're joined now by John Hardie, the Deputy Director at the Russia Program at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And John, thanks for being with us on i24 News today. I want to begin by just asking, what should we make of Europe's international claims in The Hague, trying to quantify Ukraine's war damages? How effective could this actually be in holding Russia financially accountable for its invasion?
Well, thanks for having me. I think if you judge effectiveness on the metric of will Russia actually pay, well, of course, Moscow is not going to pay this. But there is something to be said for naming the wrong that was done. That's an important part of giving justice to legitimize and validate the wrong that was done to people and kind of point that out and say, this is not okay. Now, in terms of actually making Ukraine at least partially whole, obviously Ukraine, as you mentioned, its European partners, as you mentioned, can tap those frozen Russian assets, which is vitally important, not just for justice, but for sustaining Ukraine's finances and war effort through 2026 and potentially longer.
Well, how would this actually work? Tapping into those frozen assets of Russia's central bank, they're estimated to total some 290 billion euros. So how would it actually work to use those frozen Russian assets, and how might other countries view this, perhaps even thinking twice before putting their money in Europe?
Well, the idea currently under discussion in the European Union is to tap, there's some 210 or so billion euros worth of frozen Russian assets held by the Belgian-based securities depository Euroclear. So those would be tapped, a loan given to Ukraine, so-called reparations loan. It would be repayable only in the extremely unlikely event that Moscow actually pays reparations. So essentially a grant based on those assets. Belgium, as the listeners may know, has some concerns around that. They're not insurmountable. The EU Council is supposed to meet here in the coming days. Hopefully we'll take a decision to move this ball forward.
How might this pressure Russia, if at all, when it does come to some of the ongoing negotiations to actually end the war with Ukraine?
I think Moscow understands it's not going to get those assets back, and I think it's prepared to be pragmatic about that. What's really most important here is making sure Ukraine is on a sound financial footing going into next year. Their coffers will start to run out sometime in the spring. And so if Moscow is looking at the situation and saying, hey, I think Ukraine is about to really fall off the cliff financially here, I think Russia would have less incentive to compromise. So you want to put Ukraine in a strong position, and Europe, frankly, to get a seat at the negotiating table, they need to kind of get their act together.
And what about Russia so far? Anything as far as their stance, how they've reacted to all of the news about this new commission?
Well, not really just today's news, but in general, one of the Russian demands is to actually resolve and kind of drop all of these legal claims against Russia, not only for reparations, but for war crimes against Putin and other Russian officials. And obviously for Ukraine, that's a non-starter, and for much of Europe as well.
All right, John Hardie, thanks so much for being with us on i24 News today, as this is all unfolding in The Hague right now. Thanks for bringing it down for us.
Thank you.